Hello, everyone.
And welcome to our next episode where we meet another Agile Academy Ambassador. Today, I'm being joined by Arne Åhlander. Arne is one of the, longest serving certified Scrum trainers or the trainer approval committee members or whatever. And Arne and I actually have a shared story. Probably Arne has similar stories with a lot of other people because Arne was sitting in the trainer approval committee when I became a certified Scrum trainer in 2015. So that day for my career, obviously one of the most important ones, was also a day where the day where I met Arne. And to this day, I'm grateful for you passing me through that interview, and I have really, really good memories about that. So Arne, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And as a comment, you made it easy to say yes to you as a certified Scrum trainer. You showed a lot of understanding and good thoughts about Scrum and the way to teach Scrum. So it was easy.
Still happy to hear that, although it's now
Good.
10 years later.
Yeah.
So, Arne, we briefly talked prior to starting this recording, obviously, and the intention of these interviews is to present the ambassadors, like people like you, to the broader community. And what I always start out with is the question, where did your Agile journey start? So what were the beginnings of your journey? Walk me through how all of this happened.
Yeah. So it's funny that you ask, because I usually tell a story that I call my Agile moment or something like that, where it all started. And I was working for a company in Lund in southern Sweden. I was VP of product management, and what the company did was producing software for mobile phones. And that was at the time when we didn't know about smartphones at that time. We talked about feature phones. And our customers were mobile phone manufacturers all over the world. We developed new versions of our products, like browser for mobile phones, content manager, messenger, camera applications, and things like that. And we usually ran 9 months long projects for the new versions of our software. And from a product management perspective, we were interested in telling the developers and the R&D department that out of all of the requirements, these are the most important for the next release. So make sure that they are in the release. And the others, of course, we would like them as well. So at one time, I was talking to a project manager, and I asked her, if something happens and we really need to get a release out of the door, not after 9 months, but maybe after 5 or 6 months, how can you and the R&D department and the project make sure that those prioritized requirements are actually in that release? And that's when she told me, we have to do things in a certain order. And you know how it is when you get your clothes on. You need to put your sock on before you put your shoe on. And I said, yes, I fully understand that. But what does that have to do with software development? And then that got my thoughts rolling. So I thought there must be ways of doing this. Why not focus on the most important stuff first, instead of doing it phase gate wise, which was the case there, waterfall and not very agile. So that's when my journey started. And this was like 25 years ago. And then, that's the start.
Yeah. So early 2000s, you're VP of product management at this software company, and you face that challenge, if I summarize it right, that the highest priority items cannot be worked on in the order that you would want them to be worked on. Is that correct?
They couldn't be finished in the order I wanted them to be finished.
Okay.
Of course, they worked on it, but they did, as we are all used to, they did the design, they did the development, they did the integration, and they did the testing of everything. So after 6 months, in best cases, they started to test, but nothing was really done.
Nothing was really done. So back then, 25 years ago, we didn't have the technical infrastructure that we have today. You probably didn't have CI/CD pipelines, et cetera. I'm assuming, and you correct me when my assumptions are wrong. So what did you change back then? So you felt frustrated. There's a problem. There's a challenge. What did you and your unit do?
We tried to convince people. We tried to give nods to the parts of the R&D where they were trying to move in this kind of direction, because a lot of the developers, they had heard at the time about XP, extreme programming, and they were trying to learn about that. Um, I was not able to make a very big impact to change in that company. So you could say that I stopped working for that company and worked somewhere else where I found it more possible to do those things. So it was actually a consultancy company that I started to work with. And the thing that got me interested in that company was that they had a ad in the newspaper for looking for new people to join the company, and the ad was a picture of 20 people, and they wrote in the capture that these 20 people, they just got their certified scrum master uh, how do you say, accommodation or certificate. And that made me interested, because one of the guys in the photograph was a guy who recruited me to two other jobs in the past, not the one that I was working on currently. So I had a lunch with him, and then eventually I was called for an interview, and I ended up in that company consulting on Agile and Scrum and helping companies become better in that area.
Okay, so 25 years ago, early 2000s, all of this starts.
Yeah.
Now, where did the journey take you next? So you start with that consulting company. You probably work with several clients.
Yeah.
What were some of the engagements? And you don't obviously have to name any clients
Right.
by name, but maybe you can share some of the challenges that your clients were facing, and then how you and your probably other consulting team members
Yeah.
approached those problems, and where agility helped you make meaningful changes, and where you maybe even felt or faced a lot of resistance trying to help the
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah. So the latter is true. Maybe not a lot, but absolutely resistance from all different parts of the client companies. I'm thinking about three clients. One was a mobile operator, and they had many business projects ongoing to try to figure out new things to offer their subscribers of the mobile network. And they noticed that in the large infrastructure of a mobile operator, they had one particular component where the development of that was always the bottleneck of what they did. So they started thinking maybe the team working on that should do things in another way. So they decided to try out Scrum for that team. And instead of having the business project allocating team member A to a pre-study, and team member B and C to a development phase, and team member D to some testing phase of different projects, they said, let's put together a backlog of all the things that we want you guys to do and allow you to work together. So that was quite interesting, because the team members, they felt better about that. They said to me that it's much easier to ask for help, and it's much easier to get help. And we also learn together, they said. And management of the company, they were really up in the stars, because they said that what we usually struggle with are those things where one project wants person X and another project also want that. So they kind of raise the issue to us, and we need to make the decisions. We never get that from this team anymore. And then, of course, there were resistance, because the managers of the projects, the business projects, they had to relearn. They had to, instead of allocating people into their phases, they had to write requirements and put it in the product backlog. And then in the beginning, we were prioritizing based upon deadline, of course, what was most urgent. And when that was out of the way, um, it was possible to work in a more normal way. That helped that company, and it helped the team. And I heard from the R&D manager a couple of months later that now we're really agile. I wasn't 100% in agreement with that, but it all even felt good. So yeah, that's one of the clients.
Yeah. And I mean, being agile is always a relative thing,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So
And so I thought that if he feels that there is a change in the direction that we all believe is good, that's excellent.
exactly.
What I tried to build upon. Absolutely.
Exactly. So when you move from 2 releases a year
Yeah,
to a release every 2 weeks, that's already very agile for them, right? Now, an organization that is releasing every day 100 times, they might be looking and laughing at them, right? But
absolutely.
it's always relative of
Yeah,
where you are coming from. So we earlier talked about technology
yeah,
and infrastructure. So at the beginning of your journey, a lot of those things that we take for granted today did not exist. So can you walk me through this, as you have been to some extent part of that movement from the very, very early days? How or which of these elements evolved at more or less what point, and how they, from your perspective, changed the industry?
yeah. What I usually look at when it comes to that aspect is continuous integration. That was a great stepping stone towards higher levels of agility, I would say. Those companies that learned about that, and that has been around for a long time, but as soon as that was possible, a lot of issues were able to get rid of. So I would say continuous integration. And now today we talk about CI/CD, of course, and that has been around for a while. CD as well, continuous deployment. And what I see is that all of this technology advancement is good, and it makes things a little harder also because you need to choose what is good for us. Can we? Okay, we heard about that company. They are using continuous deployment. Maybe we should do it as well. But that is an example of things that you do not always benefit from doing. It
Mhm.
depends a lot on the product. I mean, companies like Amazon and Google, they benefit from continuous deployment. Um, a company producing software for a car, for example, may not be as dependent on continuous deployment as the former ones. So those are a couple of thoughts with regards to technology advancement. And another thought that I have around that is that when I sorry, when I talk about Scrum, I talk about the word emergent in English. I think growing or popping up, and I mainly talk about emergent requirements and how to deal with those. And I also talk about emergent capabilities of the team that makes us better in the future. So maybe we can plan to be faster in the future. And then also emergent technology that we need to be on the lookout for. What are technology that we don't know of today that we may benefit from tomorrow? And right this day, as we sit here and speak, AI is the most is the best example of emergent technology that will change many companies. So being on the lookout for emergent technology is important.
Yeah. Now, speaking of AI, how do you see AI impacting product teams?
That is something that I am slowly digging into. And I haven't explicitly worked with AI in product teams. However, I have noticed that from my own perspective, as a consultant and coach, I have gained from using AI. Um, After we finish this talk today, I will make a recording for a conference, a pre-recorded presentation. And I told my wife yesterday that I was working on the script for the presentation yesterday, and I was able to cut the lead time of getting from the idea in my head to a finished script by using AI in a way that I could do it in half a day, where I uh, historically have been able to, I've been, it has been necessary for me to kind of mull the thoughts for a week or something like that. So from a week to half a day, which is enormously good. And I believe that will be possible for product teams to find that support. The research you can get support in, and figuring out what users and customers may be interested in, and kind of filter out the outliers and concentrate on the most important things. Those are just a couple of thoughts around that.
Yeah. I'll give you a few things that I have observed in this space, starting out with my own work. So for my courses, what I love to do is to create fictional case studies,
Yeah.
which participants can then discuss. Right? For example, product strategy, etc. Now, I used to write those fictional case studies myself, obviously based on observations that I have had at various companies where similar patterns had emerged. And writing one of those case studies would take me at least half a day, mostly, in most cases, 1 day.
Yeah.
Right? If you want them to be good, to be like Harvard Business School level case studies, it takes a lot of time.
Exactly.
Now, with AI, it goes down to half an hour, maybe 15 minutes. And I get even so much better ideas of like fictional products in all sorts of industries that I would not be possible to come up with myself, because I don't have the depth of expertise in every single industry, right? So this is one thing that I've seen my own work change.
And it's interesting, what your example and my example is approximately cutting the time to 1/10.
Yes. Absolutely.
Both examples.
Absolutely. Now, when I look at my team, I see the same thing. I mean, the people that used to write code,
Yeah.
they can write that code so much faster. If they want to write automated tests around that, all that kind of stuff can be done so much faster. But the other thing I see with AI is it accelerates learning.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you also speak about I-shaped and T-shaped people and how important it is within a cross-functional team
Absolutely.
to have more and more of those T-shaped people, right? It's basically a no-brainer. And when I look at my team of developers, we have 3 developers in our company. And traditionally, one of them used to be the designer and the other 2, basically the engineers, coding both front end and back end. And for our designer, it was already some kind of a stretch to become a front-end developer.
Yeah.
But he learned that because he was also curious and capable, but it took him a lot of time to learn. Now, with the support of AI, within a few weeks or month, he also does a ton of back-end stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
So it does not only accelerate the pace of work for people who are knowledgeable in a space like you and I and the engineers, but it also allows people to move into a space where they traditionally would not be able, or without significant time investment, not be able to get into. And I think if I think about product teams, I think this could result in product teams becoming so much smaller,
Yeah.
which again increases their capacity or capability to deliver great products because they have less communication or administrative overhead. But it would also allow those teams to just do like more amazing stuff based on the technologies they can leverage as a small team with the support of AI to ultimately build stuff. So I'm super excited to see where this is going. Henrik Knieberg, someone that both of us know, he's doing a lot of work in that space, and I get to speak to Henrik quite often. So it's super interesting to see where AI and especially AI agents could take us, and how they could help small but also larger companies do amazing stuff just with less people, which doesn't mean that half of the people need to end up on the street, but like they can just do so much more with the number of people they have today. So
Yeah,
excited about that.
That's an interesting observation, that if you free time, it doesn't mean that you have to let people go. It gives you the opportunity to do much more and much better, hopefully, as well. So that's something that some people forget about. And that's why sometimes new technology is considered to be a threat, and you have the resistance also. So that is one of the things with what we are doing, is that you need to think about those things, the psychological aspects of things and the technical aspects of things and the human aspects of things. So a lot of things that goes together, which makes it so very interesting to work with people and help them to use what they already know and what they can learn in the future to get even better.
Yeah. So, Arne, we spoke about technology.
Yes.
I want to move this conversation into a different topic, slightly different topic, which is culture.
Yes.
Because when I look at my clients, and I'm really interested to get your perspective on this, like having individual scrum teams, I'm say easy, but I say easy again in a relative sense,
Yes.
because if you want to have then the whole organization be more agile, and that doesn't mean that they consist of like thousands of scrum team, but that they have the ability, as Craig Larman says, to turn on a dime for a dime, right? Based on changing customer needs and market disruptions, and suddenly the supply chains don't work anymore and all of that, right? Make those quick adjustments or adaptations, right? I find that so much more difficult than having one great high performing software team. And I assume for you it's been similar over the course of your career. So how do you approach organizational change, which for me always means culture change, which again then means how we work as a collective, how we collaborate, etc. How do you approach that?
So I'm not sure I do it in the best of ways, but I do it
There's no best.
by asking questions. What I mean is that I believe I still have a lot to learn in that area. So I when I work with my clients, before we even decide to work together, I always ask them, why on earth do you want to work in this way? If it's agile, if it's Scrum, if it's something else, usually it's similar. And that sometimes gets some surprise. I get some surprised looks at me. So why are you asking that? We thought you knew why we should work in this way. And I say, well, I do. I have a lot of things on my list of why you could do that, but I don't know which reasons are good for you. And if order for me to help you help yourself, then it's good for me to know that. And then I also talk about my three sons who are from the age of 28 to 23. And I tell people about how you sometimes do like other people do. And I said, I tell them that if I do as my sons do when it comes to clothing, that would look ridiculous on an old man like me. So that's what I try to figure out. Are you wanting to change because you've seen some other one change and you do it just because they do it? That may not be the best of reasons. So let's figure out what is your real reason. Because usually when I'm called in, there is a seed for something to change. There is something which is a friction or a pain or something like that. So it's good to help the client to figure that out. It's not always obvious to them and not to me either uh, in a first glance. And then I usually talk also, and I try to have some initial workshops and try to do exercises to help people realize that in order to actually get different results, which we often do, we need to change something, and that could be ourselves that needs to be changed. So those are the things that I try to do, and then sometimes it's successful, and sometimes it doesn't hit at all, and that's life, I guess.
I I had to laugh when you mentioned the example with your sons and you wearing clothes like they do, and how ridiculous that probably might look. Other than when it's carnival, this is the time of the year where we're allowed to wear whatever we want without people thinking that we're
And I'm not
ridiculous.
saying that my sons dress in a strange way. It's just that it's okay for them to follow the fashion trends, but I should be a little careful.
Absolutely, right. And they wouldn't also want to wear the same stuff that you're wearing, right? Because then their friends would be looking at them like, "What? Like what happened to you?" But that's the thing. I think starting out with what is your reason for change is incredibly important. The other thing that I have come across as an additional question, because sometimes people are aware of a reason, but they don't still have the appetite.
Right, right.
And then through from the appetite that then translates into ambition, and ambition translates into the will. And I think there's a lot of will that's needed in order to really do such a big change,
Yeah.
especially when that change also includes ourselves and is not only something that those teams over there, right? They need to change how they work, but I can stay as I am today. So how do you move from identifying the reason or creating clarity and a shared understanding around it to then having that ambition, that will, and then the actual execution of the change?
Yeah, that is the big challenge, and as you kind of touch upon, a lot of times when I'm engaged, I'm engaged by management, and it's not unheard of that it is management that needs to change the most. And I was in Oslo in Norway earlier this week to deliver a certified Scrum product owner class, and I was quite lucky because we had a 15 attendance in a in-person class, which is quite good, I would say today, and three of them came from the same company, and they talked about that management in that company, they wanted development to become more agile. And I got the feeling that the three participants, they were in favor of that, but they didn't have a high belief in management actually understanding what they were asking about. Because at the same time they were asking for agile, they were also asking for toll gates, and they were asking for reports of that and that and that. Yeah, I try to help people to think. And I don't believe that I can tell you or anyone else something that makes you change. You need to find the change in yourself. And that's true for management as well as developers and all others in a company. And it's sometimes really, really cumbersome to get to that insight. And sometimes I'm happy enough to, or lucky enough to help people gain that insight. And sometimes I'm not. So then I try to figure out, yeah, I mean, when you are in a company, you see different signs here and there and there, and then you try to use them to kind of strengthen your case, not because it's a fight, but you believe that that's a stepping stone for someone to get thinking about things. Then I have been in situations where I've been asked to not provoke as much as I did in that particular case. So I've hit some hard rocks as well when I thought it was good to provoke. I like to provoke people, and it's not always the best of strategies, of course.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, every client has to choose the type of consultant or coach they want to work with,
Yes.
but also every consultant or coach has to choose the type of client they want to work with,
Yeah,
right?
and so to me that means that when I get the feeling that I'm able to help the client, then of course I'm interested in continuing. And I like to kind of get a feedback after each activity I have with the client and ask them, okay, do you still want to work with me? Because, and sometimes I tell them, I believe that I have not been able to help you very much. So maybe you should look for someone else for different reasons. So, and that's sometimes necessary discussions that you need to have, and it's hard because, of course, I like to keep the assignment also,
Absolutely.
but I
Absolutely.
need to think about the customer first and myself last. And I'm lucky enough to be in the position that I can do that. So that's good, I guess.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I think it's super important. Now, Arne, I have a question because my observation, I mean, you and I, we met 10 years ago in that interview for me to become a CST. And then we met over like every 6 to 12 months at global Scrum gatherings, etc. And I also, to some extent, followed like where you were spending your time. We had our chit chats, etc. If I remember correctly, you also taught a lot of courses outside of Sweden, outside of Europe. Spent time in India, maybe Vietnam, and other countries. We were speaking of culture earlier within an organization that needs to change. What kind of cultural differences with regards to the willingness or the ambition to change did you observe when you spent time with people, with course participants in all of those different countries?
Oh, that's a big question, and
We still have time.
I have some experience to dig into and try to answer the question. And I have been lucky enough so that teaching Scrum has taken me around the world. I measure things, so I measure the number of countries where I've taught Scrum, and it's 23 to up until today, and will probably stay 23 if I understand it correctly. So I've been to India, I've been to China, I've been to Vietnam, and a couple of other countries in that part of the world. And the observation that I made is that people are people. Wherever we go, people are people, and they are interested in doing a good job, and they are frustrated when they're not able to do a good job. However, culture is different, as you touch upon, and I'll give you a couple of insights of things that has happened to me in yeah, I don't need to point out a particular country, but in eastern parts of the world. Um, so once I was in a class and we were talking about sustainable development, sustainable pace. And then one of the participants says that, well, that's okay for you to talk about sustainable pace when you come from Sweden. But here we solve problems by working harder and add more people to the problem. That's so sustainable pace is not the thing here, he said. And that that gave room for an interesting discussion because the participants in the class were quite open to that. Another situation I was in was didn't have to do explicitly with Scrum. It had to do with Agile and Lean. And I was working for a consultancy company at the time, and we got an assignment. Three of us got to go to Asia, visit a large company, and visit different parts of their operation for 10 days. And the idea was that we should investigate or observe their ways of working and give them ideas on how to increase the agility and leanness of their ways of working. So we were mainly watching software development. And I told my boss that since we're supposed to make a report and present the report to a management group at the last day of our visit, I think it's good for us to meet with that management group up front the first day of our visit to kind of learn a little about what they want. Because, of course, we have a contract and we all know what contracts are. They are kind of an artifact. And then what goes on in the mind of people, we don't really know. So for different reasons, that was not possible to obtain. So we didn't get that opportunity to listen to the management group up front. We were treated very well during the visit. We had a contact person who helped us reach the people that we wanted to reach. Towards the end of this period, we sat down, we worked long hours to put together a presentation. And we were supposed to deliver the presentation to the management group on Friday afternoon, right after lunch. And the evening before, we were told that here are a couple of mid-level managers that want to listen to your presentation. See, we can have that as a rehearsal. And that was interesting. That went very well. And they were happy about our findings and they thought our suggestions were reasonable. And then so we were quite happy, and our contact person even started talking in terms of then after tomorrow, we need to talk about how we can continue this collaboration because that was in the cards for us as a consultancy company as well, of course. And then came Friday. Out of the three consultants, I was the most senior, so I got to make the presentation. And I noticed that the big boss of the management group, he was it looked like he was sleeping. And I know from experience that that is not always the case. People may be fully attentive even if they close their eyes. And then, like 30 minutes into the presentation, he stopped me and he said, "I'm sorry, but it looks like you have not listened to your customer." And
Wow.
yeah, you can imagine my heart beating, and I tried in my best um, diplomatic way to ask, "Thank you for the observation, and how come you say that?" And he said that, well, you know, you've been talking a lot of values and you've been talking of principles, but what we want are practices. That's what we need. And we really want practices. And you only talk about values and principles. And he was totally correct in his observation. I was talking about values and principles because we wanted to lay the foundation and get that in place, and then starting to talk about practices that could fit with those values and principles. So that was a big clash. And to make the long story not too long, we didn't get any continued work in that company.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I love that one sentence that you said: "People are people." Um, Sometimes we forget that. Even within one country,
Yeah,
we tend to forget that. Within one company, we tend to forget that. It's very easy to say, the top management over there and the people in the team. People are people, and understanding that, and then approaching conversations on an eye to eye level, from a person to person level.
yeah.
I think that's very important. And I don't know how you look at this, but I think a lot of organizations, a lot of people just have to learn how to communicate better, how to collaborate better. And this is the stuff that drives people like us, right? Help them do that better. And obviously we have to role model that. Now, with regards to time, we're reaching the end of our time
Yeah.
box, but I still want to give you, Arne, the opportunity to briefly also share, what do you spend your time on today? So, what would an ideal client engagement look like for you? What kind of challenges do you seek out, and how do you support those clients then?
So I believe I can help clients that are not too small, that have many teams working, and where they, even if they don't believe it themselves, they probably have some barriers between the different teams and the departments of the company. So I'm looking for clients, and I believe I can help clients where you hear a lot of us and them, because we want we, even on a company level. So, and also what I claim that I am good at is helping people to talk to each other, getting a conversation going, increase the communication, and hopefully bridge the gap between different parts of a company. Because it's usually not only one department or one team or one individual, it's us together, and increasing the we. You could say that maybe I should use that as a tagline. I'm increasing our we.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great for companies, and that's great for society and for humanity in general. So, Arne, with this said, thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me today. Thank you so much for that day 10 years ago where you
Yeah.
helped me pass this test and have my own career and my own journey as part of that. And I'm very much looking forward to having you part of the Agile Academy Ambassadors community. Thanks for that.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to be more engaged as an Agile Academy ambassador. Thank you very much.
Bye, Arne.
Bye.